Welcome in, Big Blue Nation, to another episode of the Cats Talk podcast. I'm your host, Cameron Johnston. He is your host, Tyler Britton. Tyler, the college football playoff bracket was just dropped today, and no Wildcats. Did we not prove enough how good we were during the season? What was your takeaway? I'm sitting there watching it live. It's like a 2-hour ordeal, and the Kentucky Wildcats were left off the CFP playoff. Was our 4-8 record not good enough?
Yeah, Cam, I was generally surprised, just like you are. I was looking at that ticker come through, and they were listing off all the teams, on the playoff bracket, and I think there's a compelling argument to put Kentucky in there, resume for resume. I mean, you see Kentucky, they come within 1 point of beating Georgia. We end up having a really good basketball team coming out, for that. So, we just beat Gonzaga. You would think that would be enough to put us, just give us a shoe-in into the college football playoff. I don't know why they're putting teams like Oregon in there. I mean, that's just ridiculous to put them at the number one seed. That's crazy. Kentucky should be easily the ninth seed there, going against Ohio State in Columbus this weekend. I'll give Georgia the top seed here. They did play very well against Texas this weekend, but I think Kentucky should definitely fit in there somewhere in the bracket.
I couldn't agree with you more. In case anybody was listening to this for the first time and couldn't tell the sarcasm in either one of our voices, yeah, this Kentucky team was nowhere near even being in the thought of playoff contention, especially after that Vanderbilt game where everything just went downhill and downhill fast. But Tyler, let's go ahead and talk about this college football playoff. An SEC team did get snubbed. Alabama Crimson Tide got snubbed in this game. It's kind of surprising seeing a team like SMU, who plays in the ACC, a very mediocre conference, to say it nicely, gets in over the Tide. What were some of your thoughts on stuff like that?
Yeah, to be honest, I was, I'll be honest. I'm generally surprised Alabama got left off. I think this is the first time since the college football playoff was created, and this is this is the first time we're doing the 12 team playoff, but this is the first time Alabama hasn't been on it. So generally surprised that Alabama didn't get the shoe in here. But overall excited to see what the 12 team playoff can actually bring. I think Oregon obviously is the clear cut number one. However, just looking at a couple of these teams here, I think Oregon actually has a harder path than teams like Penn State and Texas. I think they both have easier schedules, to be honest, to get to the championship round over teams like Oregon or Georgia, for that matter. So, but Cam, what was your take on taking a look here before we get too in depth with this?
Yeah, I mean, one of my takes was, the NCAA headquarters is in Indianapolis. Of course, they found a way to get Notre Dame and Indiana in there. Of course they did.
Against each other.
They're going to make sure somebody wins and goes to the next round. Luckily enough for them, their misery is going to be put out when they face Georgia. So they can try and, bump their Indiana teams however much they want. They're only winning one game. I agree with you. I think Oregon got gypped in this bracket. I'm not an Oregon fan. I don't have anything against them either. But, you're looking at them right now. They're playing the winner of Ohio State, Tennessee in the second round versus, Boise State's playing the winner of SMU, Penn State. Georgia's playing the winner of IU and Notre Dame. I think they got probably the hardest draw. Just to get to the championship game, you're talking about beating Tennessee or Ohio State and then more than likely beating Texas just to get to the championship game. Tough road for the Oregon Ducks.
I agree. I think if I'm looking at the bracket here, I think Penn State actually might have the easiest schedule to get there. I have my doubts about them playing against bigger teams, but their first two games would be against SMU and then Boise State. I think that puts them into a clear path to get to the semifinals there, which would probably be against Georgia. That would be their toughest matchup. That's where I think they would end up crumbling. But if they can get past one tough team versus, Ohio State has to get through Tennessee and then Oregon and then more than likely against Texas, that would be their path. I think Ohio State might actually have the hardest path there. You could also make an argument for Texas, but I think Ohio State I think Texas or Ohio State and Tennessee have the hardest paths to get to the championship game.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. If you're one of the fan of those two teams, unfortunately getting that 8 and 9 seed where you got to face a number one the next week, even after you face a tough team the first week, it's definitely going to be tough. let's go ahead and get some of our predictions going here. Let's go ahead and start at the top left of the bracket. Tennessee is going into this U facing Ohio State. Who do you got there?
I'm going to go. This is tough. So, obviously from Ohio here, more times than not, I'm going to say Ohio State just because I think they have the better talent on the field. Late in the season, usually they can get through the playoffs. It's just after that Michigan loss, it's really tough to go with them. I think Ohio State has a certain way of playing football. Tennessee's a good team to play against. I do have Ohio State winning, but it's going to be a very sloppy win. It's not going to be the way that I want them to win, which is a lot of finesse football, getting the ball outside to Jamari Smith and some of these other guys. So I have Ohio State winning, but it's going to be a close one. I think it's going to be 17-20.
Yeah, I'm definitely not going to get into the score predictions. I don't know these teams nearly well enough like I know the Cats, and my score predictions for the Cats weren't good this year either. So I'm going to go with Tennessee in this game. I think the style that they play, something that Ohio State hasn't seen this year. And Tennessee's been more physical than they have been traditionally going in. And I can't believe this game right now, Tennessee or Ohio State's a 7.5 point favorite. I get that it's at the shoe. It's one of one of the most historic buildings in college football. I still can't believe it's 7.5. But I would have Tennessee winning this game. Let's go ahead and go down to the bottom of the bracket. Texas versus Clemson. Who do you got there?
I think this is a clear-cut victory. Texas is going to get the win here. I was shocked that they lost against Georgia, but it still went down to the wire. I don't think Clemson has the ammo to beat Texas this year.
Yeah, give me Texas. And I do think at some point during this playoff run, Quinn Ewers is limping around. Like, he's so immobile at the moment right now. That game right before they played Kentucky, he got hurt. Hasn't really looked the same since. Wouldn't be surprised if at any point you see Arch start to get kind of like that the iconic Alabama versus Georgia game where Tua came in to replace Jalen Hurts. Something kind of like that to kind of pass the torch down to the next guy in line. I got Texas winning this game. But Clemson has been playing a lot better after their pretty poor start to the beginning of the year.
I'm going to piggyback off of that, Cam. I actually believe the difference in the Texas-Georgia game was Carson Beck getting hurt and not Quentin Ewers. I think if it roles reversed, they have Arch Manning went in versus I forget his name. Help me out here. The kid from Georgia, the backup quarterback for Georgia.
This is Wofford. I thought was his last name. I could be wrong.
I don't remember. Whoever he was when he went in, I thought he played phenomenal. Compared to what Carson Beck was doing. Obviously, Carson Beck with the elbow injury, but I think if roles reverse there, I think Texas is getting that first round bye there.
All right, let's go to the Battle of Indiana. Notre Dame versus Indiana. I hate Indiana. I lived in Indiana. I hate Indiana. I hate Indiana football. I hate Indiana basketball. Don't like Notre Dame either. But give me the Irish. I know some Irish people. They're good people. I'll go with the Irish.
So this is a really tough game. I was pondering this one for a little bit too. I don't have faith in either one of these teams getting past the next round, but obviously one of them has to get there. I'm going to give the edge to the Big Ten team here and go with Indiana. I think they're going to beat the Irish. I don't think the Irish have played the same level of competition as Indiana. So I'm going to give the slight edge here to Indiana to get to the next round.
All right, and going down to the bottom of the bracket, easily the worst game, in my opinion, in this bracket. SMU versus Penn State. ACC versus Big Ten. Couldn't be any less appealing to me. I don't even know if I watch this game. Tyler, what do you got for this one?
Look, I think SMU has a great chance to play competitive in this game. They're going to play just like Kentucky did against most of the teams this year. Who am I kidding? They're not going to have a shot. Penn State's going to get to the next round with ease here. It might as well be a bye week. They might as well put Penn State against Boise State next week.
Yeah, I do think this game will actually be close. I just think going to play at Penn State is going to end up being the difference in this game, and that's why you're going for the higher seeds. You get that home game. I do think if this game was at SMU would find a way to win this game. I don't trust James Franklin in big games. He's awful in big games. You see that year in, year out. but I do think they find a way to win this game. All right, let's stick in that side of the bracket. We both have Penn State winning. They'll be taking on Boise State in the next round. Who do you got there?
I'm with you with your last point you make. I don't know if Penn State's meant for the big moments, but I just don't see Boise State as a true competitor in these playoffs. So I might have Penn State get into the semifinals again, or not again, but I might have them advancing past Boise State to get to the semifinals here. So I'm going to take Penn State.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with you on this one. I'm going to take Boise State. Really, it's just I'm betting on the best player. The best player in college football right now is Ashton Jeanty. I mean, you see him week in and week out go for 220 yards and a touchdown, and you're looking at the stat sheet at the end. You're like, oh, he didn't have a great game. But the guy had 220 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think Ashton Jeanty kind of powers away to beat Penn State in this game. I do think that will be their only win in the playoff. But for a Boise State program to potentially come away with a Heisman and a college football playoff win, that's going to be huge for the program going forward. Then up to the top of the bracket on that side, I'll have Georgia versus Notre Dame. You'll have Georgia versus Indiana. I don't know what's going on with Carson Beck. It obviously didn't look good. He came in for the last snap of that game against Texas just a couple days ago. I'm still going to take Georgia. The talent gap, in my opinion, is just too big. Indiana football, just in general, whether it's Notre Dame, Indiana, it's never good. Hasn't been good since, 1905, back in Notre Dame's heyday. Give me Georgia.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. I think Georgia's just on another level, even with Carson Beck being hurt here. They have far better pieces across the board. Neither Notre Dame or Indiana, whoever makes it to the next round, I think will be able to compete with the Georgia team. Give me Georgia here.
All right, and then going down to the other side of the bracket, we'll both have Texas versus Arizona State. I don't think this game's close. I think Texas wins by a lot, and they show the difference in strength of schedules and strength of conferences.
Yeah, Texas has really done a really good job this year transferring over to the SEC. I mean, obviously, they came really close to winning the SEC their first year over. I think it's a clear-cut victory. Texas is going to win. They're going to have supporters follow them here. It's not even going to be close. And then for whatever reason, I think if Arch Manning goes in, it just makes my case even more. So.
Yep. All righty. Let's get to the final four here. You have Oregon versus Ohio State. I'll have Oregon versus Tennessee. I think, at least for me, I think this game's going to be a lot closer than most people expect. I think either way, whether it would be Ohio State or Tennessee, this game would be very close. That's why we were both kind of in agreement that we kind of think Ohio or Oregon might have got shafted a little bit with how this bracket turned out. I'm going to take Tennessee. I trust the strength of schedule they've played. I mean, granted, Oregon has played a bunch of good teams as well. I mean, they beat Boise State and they beat Ohio State, and of course they just beat Penn State. But I was kind of disappointed with how they did play in that Big Ten championship. I honestly thought they would beat Penn State by more than 8 points like they did. I'm just gonna SEC homer over here. I'm gonna take the SEC team.
I'm going to go with, look, I'm going to put it this way. If Ohio State's able to move on, that means that they've gotten past the Michigan game, means they've gotten their rhythm back, and they owe Oregon. They lost to Oregon earlier in the year. They lost down, it was Will Howard had a not so great moment, and they ran out of time. They didn't even get a chance to kick the game-winning field goal. Granted, that could have been missed, but I think Ohio State has something to prove. That was in Oregon. This is going to be at a neutral site. I believe Ohio State, if they can get to this round, they'll have the better talent on the field as a whole, as a team. I think they get past Oregon. Like you said, it's going to be a very close matchup either way, but I do have Ohio State squeezing out a win against Oregon in the playoffs.
So both of us having the 1 seed not win a single game in the playoff. Some people might consider that a tough take, especially how well they've played this entire season. But let's keep it going. You would have Texas facing Ohio State in the semifinals. I would have Tennessee versus Texas. Just in my scenario, I'm going to take Texas. I think this Texas team, it's just so – the only way they've really beaten themselves is by beating themselves. That's the only way that they've lost games. Like we saw it firsthand the Kentucky game. Fumbling away, a touchdown, stuff like that. That's really been their only weakness so far this year. think if they finally get stuff cleaned up, I think this Texas team is they're so talented. Like they have guys in the that are going to hit the transfer portal on Monday that are starters on 85% of rosters. So I see Texas winning, not handily, but I do think they would take care of Tennessee, even though Tennessee does offer a weird brand of football that most people don't see that often.
This is a very tough matchup, Cam. It doesn't matter who's playing against Texas here. Whoever plays this game, it's gonna, whether it's Tennessee, Ohio State, or Oregon, it's gonna be a tough game. Like I said on the last prediction here, Texas has been playing out of their mind. They transferred over to the SEC. They played well in the SEC. They've proven that they belong amongst the big dogs here. So it's going to be a tough battle. But look, Ryan Day is coaching for his job. I think he powers through this game somehow. I got Ohio State winning. They're moving to the championship round here.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of coaches that are coaching for their jobs. Usually, it's a bad reason, but let's keep it moving. Let's go to the other side of the bracket. We'll both have Georgia facing off against Boise State. I will tell you what. I mean, Boise State only lost to Oregon by 3 earlier in the year, and like I told you, a lot of times you bet with who you think is the best player on the field. Ashton Jemty is amazing. I don't know about going up against this Georgia defense, though. But if Carson Beck's hurt still at this time, I mean, I'm not going to say no. I think if Carson Beck's healthy, I think Georgia wins this game probably by 10 or so. If not, I could really see this game going either way. Georgia's looked – I mean, they went to overtime with Georgia Tech. They are barely squeezing out wins, it almost seems like every week. They only beat Kentucky by 1. We went 4-8. They only beat Kentucky by 1. With Carson Beck, I think Georgia wins this game. Without Carson Beck, I think Boise State wins the game.
So obviously this is why I have Penn State in here against Georgia here. This is where I think Penn State folds. They're going to be playing a legit football contender, a really tough football team, really good coach. They're going to be in. They're going to have their hands full here. This is where I think Penn State folds. I don't care who's at quarterback. They're losing. It's going to be Georgia in the 40s and Penn State in the 20s.
All right, and that brings us to the national title game, in which, I guess to make my final pick, I will take Georgia, even though obviously we don't have injury reports for a month down the line. But it looks like I will be having the third rematch, the third game of Georgia-Texas. And as we saw just a day ago, who knows what goes on with that. I'm going to take Texas. I think Texas finds a way to win this. Like I told you, I think it's almost a passing of the torch from Quinn Ewers to Arch Manning in the national championship, just like Jalen Hurts to Tua. I think Texas finds a way to win the national championship this year.
I would 100% agree with you, Cam. I think if Texas can get into the championship, they're 100% going to beat Georgia this year. However, my prediction's not Texas. It's Ohio State. I also have Ohio State winning this game. They just have the better talent on the team, better talent on the field. They have better wide receivers. They have better defense. They have a better offensive line. They have better running backs. They have everything better. I think you can make the argument with the quarterback position, but quarterback and coach. But those would be. I got Ohio State winning. It's a clear victory here.
Whoa. All right. Now we just see the Ohio coming out with you. Quarterback, coach. I mean, that might be the most outrageous take you've had, and you've had a lot of them on this podcast. All right, that's where we're gonna wrap up the college football playoff talk on that egregious.
Wait, what do we got on this? We made a lot of picks. What do we got on this with each other?
You're buying all my rounds.
All of them?
For the rest of the time, you just tried to pick Ohio State winning. I had a winner in the first round. So if your national title pick doesn't make it out of the first round, you owe me drinks for the rest. Actually, you know what? I want them for 2025.
It's a good thing I live in Maryland, but, it sounds like a deal to me. You're going to have to come visit a lot.
All right, done deal. Let's get back into the Kentucky talk, though. Unfortunately, that's where the positivity is going to stop. We're getting into the Cats here. Tyler, transfer portal hasn't even opened yet, and already 15 different Wildcats have hit the transfer portal. What's going through your mind? We'll get into the specifics later with the names of each guys, but just in general, hearing 15 guys have already hit the portal, what are you thinking?
Yeah, this is something we already saw coming. So it's not like we're waking up this morning and we're saying like, oh man, like we just lost all these players. Like we kind of saw this coming throughout the season. We're like, okay, cool. We're going to have a lot of key losses to begin with because, some people were already projected to go into the draft and it was what it was. But, a couple big ones that I think come to mind when we're talking about departures that even if we saw them coming, it was just, we didn't like to see it. Barry and Brown and Dane Key, I think those are two big ones that we're going to be losing this year on the skill position side. You can talk about a few others as well, but that's going to be a really tough blow. A lot of firepower just gone on the offense there. Definitely some people that we're going to have to replace, some speed we're going to have to replace, reliability we're going to have to replace. Some defensive spots as well, the defensive line, Deion Walker leaving, obviously. So, there's definitely some holes that need to be filled up. We're going to need to figure out what we're filling them up with other transfers. Hopefully, we can get some of those recruits to play early, or some of those guys, some of the freshmen can grow up and develop and fill those shoes up for next year. It's going to be there's definitely some holes that need to be filled.
Yeah, let's just talk about some of those holes that need to be filled. 3 different wide receivers hit the transfer portal. And like you mentioned, with Berrien and with Dane Key, these are guys who've been in your program for 3 years, guys who have had success within your program. It's rumored that Dane Key was offered almost, if not above, $800,000 to stay for a senior season at Kentucky, and he chose not to. $800,000 is more than he would have made if he would have went into the draft, projected 4th-round pick. That's wild to think of. That's a guy that is from Lexington. It's his uncle, or his uncle does a Kentucky sports radio show. Like, he is born and bred Kentucky Blue, and you can't even pay him $800,000 a year to stay here. I think it kind of shows where the program is as of right now. Of course, we talked about Barry and Brown. It was expected. The bad thing about those 2 guys is they're going to stay in the SEC. It looks like Dane Key's going to be going to Georgia. His girlfriend goes to Georgia. He's wanting to win a national championship. What better place to go than to Georgia? With Barry and Brown, it's rumored Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Tennessee, LSU, all guys that, we're going to see at some point down the line. And I don't know about you. I'm just thinking about Barry and Brown in that Tennessee offensive scheme, or Barry and Brown in that Ole Miss offensive scheme. And I can't think of anything that fits his forte better than being able to just run routes in those 2 offenses.
Yeah, it's going to be really frustrating kind of facing up against them because we already know, it feels like we almost dropped the ball on some of these guys too. And, see the success that they had on the field with us, and then just to know that they're going to play as good, if not better, in some of these other programs, kind of frustrating to see. Hopefully we can go out there, and because we know them, we can know how to scheme against them for next year. But, obviously it's good talent leaving. It does open the door up for some other talent to come in possibly, but not easy shoes to fill.
Yeah, and speaking of that, guys that you need to step up, the guys that you need to fill in that position. At least we do have good news. Jamori Macklin is coming back next season. I'm sure some of that money that was going to be given to Dane Key was flipped over to Jamori. Well, let's go ahead and talk about some of these other guys. We've Dane Key and Berrien, we expected to leave. But, man, there's been some key losses in this group that just weren't expected. Like Tyrese Fierbury, that's a huge loss upon a spot where you really couldn't lose anybody. Edge depth right now is really thin. We're losing a bunch of guys there. Losing him hurts a lot. And same thing with Tommy Zazmer. I mean, young guy. You were looking forward to his future development. Seeing him hit the portal as well also didn't hurt. And then Keyshawn Silver, former 5-star recruit, been with you for 2 years now. Him leaving, hitting the portal as well. I mean, some of these guys are just huge blows that, honestly, at least from the outside looking in, weren't necessarily expected.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely leave some holes for us that we have to fill. And again, it's one of those things I think we saw coming. It's never good to see, some of the stuff open up the way it has. Obviously, I think this would have been a little bit different if we had more of a push. If we hit the 8-4, 9-3, maybe we're just on the bubble of the playoff. I think this would have been a different conversation today. Maybe some of these guys are flipped to staying. I think it just opens up. I think that the three key areas that we really need to focus on this offseason in the transfer portal is really finding some wide receiver depth. I think we need to fill in some offensive line depth. We really need to shore up our pass protection. I think, and then our defensive backs. I think they need to. We need some depth there. Obviously, you can make a case for defensive line. We do have some recruits that we can talk about here in just a second to highlight them. We'll go more in depth with them next week, but I think those would be the three key areas that I think we need to really focus on filling in this offseason.
Yeah, I think defensive line outside of offensive line is the biggest priority. Obviously, offensive line in the transfer portal is going to be huge because you really can't rely on college freshmen to come in just out of high school and perform at an elite level on the offensive line. It doesn't really happen. Even you look at your best players in the NFL; those are guys who sat for 2 years at their college and then played their junior and senior years. So I think that's where that's where most of our allocation has got to go when it comes to resources. Has got to be the offensive line because really think about it. You need 2 tackles. You need a center at the least. That's counting Jalen Farmer and Dylan Ray as starters at the 2 guard spots. So at the least, you need 3 starters on this offensive line out of the transfer portal. I'd like to see us go after wide receivers, but wide receiver is a spot that you can get high schoolers to come in and perform well. I mean, you saw Jamori start taking a step towards the end of the year once he started getting more utilized. Hardly Gilmore stepped up at the end of the year. You got good receivers coming in the recruiting class. I don't think receiver is as big of a need, even though it looks like it, just because we are losing Anthony Brown Stevens, Barian Brown, and Dan Key. But this defensive line needs a shot in the arm. It really does. You're losing Deion Walker. You're losing J.J. Weaver. Octavius Oxendine is also gone. And then that's not even mentioning the transfers when you talk about Keyshawn Silver, Tyrese Fearbury, Noah Matthews. I mean, this defensive line has been decimated by guys leaving. I think that's where they're going to have to spend almost as much money on the defensive line as they are the offensive line.
Do you think Cutter Boley is going to be the guy next year, or is that something that we need to address in the transfer portal as well?
Well, I don't think you can go into the season just expecting him to be the guy. I think you have to go out and you have to at least test the waters in the transfer portal. I don't know what the plan is with Gavin. I don't know if he's going to be like your competition for Cutter next offseason or if you're planning on having him transfer out as well. Really haven't heard too much of anything about him. But I don't feel good about a Gavin Wimsatt, Cutter Boley quarterback room. I'm sure you don't either. So, I mean, at the least, you're going to have to kick the tires on the transfer portal. I mean, there's some big names that have already come out in the transfer portal at quarterback. Connor Wegman from Texas A&M, their starter. Miller Moss from the University of Southern California. I mean, those are going to be big names. Those are going to command a lot of money. Is it worth commanding that much money? We tried that last year. Didn't really work with Brock. Are you more worried about building the team around the quarterback, or are you worried about going to get that quarterback? I think you try to build it around. But I do think you have to get competition for Cutter. I don't think you can just say, hey, Cutter, the job's yours to a true sophomore.
Yeah, I agree with you. I actually, I think that I think it's Cutter's job to lose in that case. But I think you move off of Gavin. I think you do find some outside experience to come in. I don't think you have to break the bank on it. But I think one of the things that Mark Stoops should really focus on, the recruiting team should really focus on, is building loyalty within the program. Obviously, get some veteran guys in here. I think you mentioned receivers, easier position to fill in. I can talk firsthand. Having a veteran in the room does make a huge difference for route running and just different situations throughout the game. I think you can go get someone who some veteran experience there. I do believe you should get some veteran experience on that defensive line as well. Get a junior or senior in there that can bring in some leadership. Maybe they're just hungry for some play time. But I think it's Cutter Boley's job to lose overall for the quarterback position here.
Yeah, I'd love to see them get a just a guy that you know is only going to be here for a year. Go ahead and get a redshirt senior, a senior, something of that nature. That even if he does beat out Cutter Boley in spring camp or whatever, you still look at him as like, hey, it's just this year, and you still have Cutter. Because I mean, right as of next year, Cutter will be a redshirt freshman. The following season, he'd be a redshirt sophomore. So even then, you're still looking at 3 full years of Cutter Boley action. So I don't think we need to force the issue. That Louisville game. I mean, let's just call it how it is. He was awful. He was very bad in that Louisville game. The Florida game, he was very bad as well. Obviously, you're reading into 2 games, and he killed it against Texas. So I mean, really, we have no idea what he is, and judging anybody behind that offense line is tough to do as is. But I'd like to see him go out and get a veteran quarterback, somebody who's just going to be there for a year, to at the least challenge him in camp. Kind of like how you see, Andy Dalton with Bryce Young. Competition like that to where, hey, Andy could win the job, but ultimately it's going to go to Bryce Young. I think that's kind of what we have to plan for Kentucky moving forward.
Sure. I see that too. It's possible. I with today's NIL, you just never know. Maybe if that's the plan is to eventually get Cutter Boley in. You just never know with NIL if they're here to stay, or if they sit another year and they're just like, you know what, it's been nice being here, but I'm going to head out. So I worry about that a little bit. I think it's Cutter's job. I think it's ultimately going to be Cutter's job to lose, but getting someone, some veteran experience with some competition there wouldn't be a bad thing. I just don't think you break the bank to do it. On that note, though, our recruiting class, how much of that do you see being an impact for next year, just given the holes that we have on our team? Do we see a lot of freshmen stepping up next year, or do we see them developing for a year or two before they get a head start? I feel like today's college football is a little bit different. I feel like there's a necessity to get some of these guys, especially these 4-stars, to get in early versus sitting around for a little bit to develop.
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit different than it was, 10 years ago or so, where it was almost mandatory that you sat on the bench for 2 years before you got your time to shine. But then again, we also do have to remember these are grown men playing against, what are going to be 18 and 19-year-olds in their first action of college football. So like some of these guys, like Andrew Purcell, I mean, he's 5'10", 185 at the moment. He's going to have to bulk up. Granted, he's going to have a full offseason to try and do that. So, I mean, it's very hard to, pick and choose guys that you think are going to make an impact as a freshman. Normally, if I was going to do that, I look at, I just look at maybe the secondary, because the secondary, you don't really have to bulk up too much. So a guy like Andrew Purcell, he could be your instant slot guy. He could be your instant nickel guy. He could get some playing time, especially with the departure of Max. I mean, it's so hard to pick guys like that. I don't see either Javion Campbell or Cedric Works making a big impact. True edge freshmen don't usually see the field unless your name's Dylan Stewart out at South Carolina. It's really hard to pick guys like that. I mean, Darren Stry, everything that we've heard about him is great, in that they're expecting him to be, the next tackle for Kentucky. But then again, you're talking about a true freshman going against SEC edge rushers, and I don't think you can ever feel good about that.
Yeah, kind of go with the recruits here. We got a couple freshmen coming in at the receiver position, and you mentioned earlier some of the younger guys stepping up to cover some of these guys who are leaving here. Do you see any of our recruits coming in this year being effective or being impacts early next year from the receiver position?
Yeah, getting to those receivers, you've seen freshman receivers make impacts this year. You saw it at Kentucky with Hardley Gilmore. You've seen it at Ohio State. I know, Tom, you watch Ohio State closely. They have a really good freshman receiver making impacts up there, and down in Alabama too. Quentin Simmons from Withrow High School in Cincinnati. I got a chance to watch him play live. Granted, he was not playing the best competition, and when I say the best competition, I mean competition in general. So I got to see him live. He's really shifty, 6 foot, 175. So, you're kind of looking for that slot guy, maybe replacing a Wandale Robinson type, trying to think of something like that for him. We've got a lot of those type of guys in this class. Montaven Quessenberry from Boyle County in Danville, Kentucky, 5'9", 175. I think Kentucky's trying to find a way to utilize that slot like they haven't been as of late. Really haven't had any slot production over the past couple of years. Last time you looked at the offense, and the offense is really good, we had a 1,000-yard receiver from the slot in Wan'Dale Robinson. I think Kentucky's really trying to get back to doing stuff like that. Even Preston Bowman, he's only 6 foot 190, but we did get a big body receiver in DJ Miller from St. Louis, Missouri, 6'3", 195. So I mean, you're looking at 4 guys potentially that could all have impacts next year. More than likely, it's probably going to be those slot guys. Hopefully, them stepping up, having Jamori Macklin on the outside, Hardly Gilmore kind of stepping up, making his role felt. And hopefully you're seeing, Fred Ferrier come get involved a little bit more than he did last year. Also a guy I kind of just want to touch on just because, he is one of our highest rated recruits, Mikael Skinner. He is a guy that I don't anticipate seeing much. I don't know if you've seen him off the field, Tyler, if you've seen any pictures of him just like on social media. This guy, I mean, they have him listed as a tight end. I'm not sure what he's going to play at Kentucky. They have him listed at 6'3.5", 6'4", 220 pounds. If this guy's 220 pounds, Tyler, you're probably 240, 250 because he is nowhere near 220 pounds. He's probably right at 200 pounds right now, and you can't play at 200 pounds as a tight end in the SEC. So I'm assuming we might play him as kind of like a big slot option, maybe kind of like a Mike Gesicki, like his role with the Bengals, something like that. That would be the only way I could see him making an impact his freshman year. But I'm hoping we do get something out of these pass catchers because we're going to need it with all our production leaving in Dane Key and Berrien Brown.
Yeah, I agree. I think some of the guys who can fit into a slot role, they might get some more action early. It's an easier role to fit into. You have more route options, less press coverage on that spot. For some of the outside guys, it might take them a year or two. That's where I think a veteran in the room really makes a difference. You learn how to run a route against the press coverage. Just because you're the biggest, most physical guy in your league in high school, there's bigger, more physical guys in the SEC. There's going to be faster guys in the SEC. So it might take a year or two for some of these guys to develop into an outside wideout. But I think the slot guys definitely have a chance to fill in early and make a name for themselves at Kentucky. So,
yeah, couldn't agree with you more. And before we just kind of sign off here, I know that's coming here soon. What about Stone Saunders, man? This guy is setting like every single Pennsylvania state record and career record as a 3-star quarterback. Feels like he's just not getting nowhere near enough recognition. I know necessarily you haven't really been able to have time to do the deep dive on him yet. Of course, we're not expecting to come in and take over Cutter's job or anything like that. But, man, it's good to see, we do have 2 potential 3-star quarterbacks coming in next year that, hey, if things do go wrong, you got guys that are vying for time and guys that are going to be competing all offseason. It's good to have guys sitting in the wings ready. That's what good programs do. They have guys sit and wait. Look at, like we brought up Texas earlier. They got Quinn Ewers now, Arch Manning sitting, waiting his time. That's just how good programs do it. So it's good to see Kentucky taking multiple stabs at getting that next quarterback that they're looking for.
Totally agree there. I think it's always good to have competition behind you. I think that having good incoming class of potential quarterback stars, never a bad thing. If we have some guys step in and win some games, I'd much rather have the Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning situation than having what we had last year. So I still think we need to get a veteran in there just to have veteran presence. We still have a redshirt freshman coming in with Cutter Boley. We still have these 2 incoming freshmen. It's a very young quarterback room to go into Kentucky football, going into the SEC with a lot of experience coming back for next year. But definitely the future could be bright for us long term. Give it a couple of years. So excited for that. Cam, was there anything else you wanted to add here before we wrap up?
No, I know you were going to touch on here later, but we'll have a deeper dive on a lot of these guys coming up here. But before we sign off, we had the line was set at 19. Was Kentucky going to get more than 19 recruits, or were they going to get less than 19 recruits? Were they going to lose some or gain some? I don't want to pump myself up. I don't want to do it, but I know you're not going to, so I'm going to pump myself up here. I was the only one to take the over. They signed 21 guys.
I took the over.
Not if I remember correctly, pal. You and
we watched the film.
I could be wrong.
I totally took the over. You and I took the over. Boyers took the under.
Okay, let's trash on Jacob Boyers. He didn't make it to this podcast anyway, so let's trash on him together.
What a piece of he is.
For Jake, I'm not sure what you were thinking, pal. We hit the over by a comfortable margin. But Tyler, go ahead and sign us off. Let people know what's coming.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in for yet another episode of the Cats Talk podcast. Hope you guys like our picks. Obviously, I'm right. We're gonna, Ohio State's gonna win the championship. Cam's gonna owe me drinks all for 2025. But if you liked what you heard today about the progression of the team, what we see for next year, please make sure to tune in for next week. Follow us on social media, TikTok, Instagram. Twitter, the whole nine, or X, sorry, the whole nine there. Make sure you follow us, share us there. We'll be here every single week. Also, make sure to tune into our basketball podcast. Basketball is really turning up. Had a big victory the other day against Gonzaga.
The Zags, baby.
Big win. So make sure to tune in for that. We have some giveaways we want to give out to you guys, which you need to make sure we have some followers here. So tune in and see you guys next week. C-A-T-S, Cats.
Go Big Blue.
Go Big Blue.